episode of the Screen Addicts podcast. I am your co host, Cinema Steven Sosa. And on this episode, we're going to be ranking our top five favorite teen rom coms that were released from the mid 2000s. I'm sorry, from the mid 90s to the early 2000s. And there's such an influx of these movies that it's impossible to choose any of them. So, in doing so, I had to bring in a very special guest, and I am going to allow himself to introduce himself to the listening audience.
What's up, Cinema Steven? Thank you for having me on the podcast. This has been a bit of a long time coming, to use a romantic term. We were two podcast ships passing in the night, very much so, through that. And I'm glad to be here. And if anything, if I'm going to make my first appearance on here, it should be about rom-coms because I love my horror, but I would, this might be a hot take to some of my listeners on my other pod, but I think I like rom-coms more. So this is what I grew up with. This was my jam, and grew up with horror, but also as someone who always viewed rom-coms as like the ultimate wish fulfillment to be the guy that gets the girl. There's always a special place in my heart for these for rom-coms, especially the 90s teen rom-coms.
So eloquently put, and I'm glad that we were able to port at the same destination because, much like yourself, I love this genre. I don't know. I've always had a fascination with drama, with comedies, or I'm sorry, romantic comedies especially. And I don't know if it's because I was raised by my single mom or something, but I always loved watching the movies she watched. So very soapy stuff, very drama filled stuff. So as it turns into the turn of the century, I think that the teen rom-coms were so apparent at that time, and they had kind of been absent from the movie theaters for quite a while. And I think that there was just such an influx of these movies that it's just there's so many to talk about. And I'm excited that you're just as excited about this podcast episode as I am because it's really nice to be able to share the same opinions of these types of movies. And before we rank our top five favorites in this particular subgenre, we, of course, are going to forego the headline segment because we like to get right into the topic, especially something like this. And before we do that, we will kind of mention a couple of things that you have possibly been watching lately on movies, TV, anything that you would like to share for the listening audience.
Yeah, I'm usually pretty behind on some of the newer shows. I like to watch a lot of older movies. There's something special about the golden age of Hollywood and older films, and part of it is for research for my other podcast, shameless plug. That was pretty scary on Wondery Plus and anywhere you can find your podcast. Nice little shameless plug there. But so I've been watching a lot of old Todd Browning movies, like the movie
Oh,
Freaks, which a lot of people forget about. People think One of Us. They think that's from the Wolf of Wall Street, which it is, but they got it from Todd Browning's Freaks. So there's something about that age of black and white movies, and I love black and white movies. I think that's the purest form of imagery, honestly, when it really boils down to it. That's just my personal take. But as far as things I've seen that are more current, I mean, Godzilla minus one, I think
mm,
if we're talking about robberies at award season, to me, that movie was such a masterpiece. And especially if you love the Honda's original Godzilla, which came out almost 70 years ago to this day, you that captured the essence of what Honda was doing with his 1954 Godzilla movie, but also what we were able to see with Godzilla minus one was going back to the roots of what Godzilla is actually a metaphor for. Which, not to get too political, but as we all know, we have a dark history with Japan. The U.S. has a pretty dark history with Japan in the
mm,
1940s with Pearl Harbor and everything. And Hiroshima, the A bomb, was really, you know, Godzilla was a metaphor for that. And in terms of what that created and what that sort of aftermath was for Japan. And to me, that's why a lot of the American Godzilla movies, they don't have the same feel because the intention and the pure essence of what it represented was gone because it was a bit Americanized. Doesn't mean good, bad, or whatever. That's a matter of opinion. But there's always been something missing from a lot of the American reiterations of Godzilla. And it's because they're, I think, neglecting the Japanese perspective. And in a weird way, I would say Oppenheimer and Godzilla minus one, they're kind of intertwined. And there was an
oh yeah.
article about this. And to me, that was like straight out of Tora Tora Tora, when they had the American director and also the Japanese director. But in this case, they're two separate movies that could technically be intertwined because of the creation of the A bomb and also the aftermath in Godzilla minus one. And one show I got into recently was Reacher. I've been meaning to watch
Mm,
it, but I just started watching it. And it's fantastic.
mm,
I think Alan Richson, I've always been I've always liked him ever since he was Aquaman on Smallville. I think some
Mhm.
people forget about that. Ever
Oh
since
yeah.
Blue Mountain State, he's
Yeah.
always had that great presence. I think he just needed that one almost franchise sort of vehicle to really show that he's a leading man, and he certainly did that. When you if you've read the novel that Reacher is based on, you didn't picture Tom Cruise. Nothing against Tom Cruise,
Mm.
but he was supposed to be a big hulking dude, and that's who Alan Richardson is. Um, so yeah, those are the main two. I mean, I do a lot of rewatches because of my field of work. I like to research writers that I like, so I've been doing a whole rewatch of This Is Us and gain a whole new appreciation of Dan Fogelman's roadmap that he created for this world, for this family. And I'd always do it like a Friday Night Lights rewatch and stuff like
Mm.
that. And so those are like the main things. I'm always watching something, but as far as the new stuff, I'm usually pretty behind. I usually get to it a little bit later, but those are like the main things. Godzilla minus one and Reacher are the two current things that I've really been watching, and also Lisa Frankenstein, which just came out in
Oh
theaters,
yes.
which is unfairly, let me just say, is unfairly getting review bombed by all
Mm.
the trades, by Rotten Tomatoes. I have my own opinions about those things, but I'm gonna leave that for what it is.
Mm.
And for anyone who's believing those reviews, I would just suggest that you check out this movie because if you love 80s John Hughes and if you love 80s George Romero, you're going to get both those things, but with Diablo Cody's dialogue, which is incredible. I think for a lot of people, it's just too smart for their brains, which is can be a double-edged sword when you write really smart dialogue. And through the lens of Zelda Williams, who does a fantastic job directing this movie, and she has an incredible cast. So don't believe the reviews on that one. I say always take reviews with a grain of salt, no matter how educated those critics are. It's a matter of opinion. Art is subjective. It's not meant to be a unilateral truth of this is good, this is bad. It's just this is what we resonate with. But the really good movies will understand that there are certain themes, character themes, story themes that can resonate on a broader audience. It's just a matter of how we interpret it. So yeah, Lisa Frankenstein would be the other plug because they got unfairly review bombed, which seems to happen a lot with Diablo Cody movies. I don't know what
Yeah.
the deal with that is, but if you love Jennifer's Body, which I do, which
I
I
do
also
too.
felt got a very unfair shake. People were too fixated on how much they didn't like Megan Fox, which to me
Right.
is still ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like she's not even in the movie that much. So what are you? You guys got to get over yourself. So yeah, those would be the three: Lisa Frankenstein, Reacher, and Godzilla minus one. Those are my best picture nominations.
Well, it's funny to start with Godzilla minus one. I absolutely agree. I thought it was one of my favorite movies of last year. I actually got to do a rewatch of it because they re-released it in black and white. And the black and white version. Did you see the black and white or the color version?
I saw both. I
Okay,
love the
yeah.
color version because it had that almost this watercolor washed out look like
Sure.
those old movies used to have.
Mhm.
But the black and white, I felt like I was watching an old Japanese movie,
Yes.
which I loved. I felt like I was watching Kurosawa's, movies.
Yeah.
That really was the pure essence of Godzilla to me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I thought it was beautiful. I thought the human emotion that it evokes with just the human characters was so emotionally depth that I was caught up with the movie. I cried 3 times watching that. I can't remember the last time or if ever I felt that emotionally vulnerable in a Godzilla movie. Certainly not the Broderick 98 version for other reasons, but the movie, and not to give spoilers on the movie or anything, but then certain characters may reappear and certain instances take place in the cockpit of a plane, and I just thought this movie is beautiful and I
Yep.
absolutely loved it. You're in a safe space with Reacher too, because me and my co-host Chris, we love that show. We think it's great. Definitely more in tune with the book because I'm not much of a book reader. I definitely prefer the movie than the book, but I actually read the first 5 or 6 books of the Reacher series by Lee Child because of the Tom Cruise movie. I was really interested in the character, and much like you said, the description of the character in the book is far from Tom Cruise. And I guess since he's more of a larger than life person, that it kind of elevated it a little bit. I'm
It's
not
his
sure,
run.
but
It's
yeah,
because of his run. That's it.
right,
That's it. Like
exactly.
that got on the part of Reacher. Let's just be
Right.
real now.
Exactly. Because it's like, oh, Tom Cruise wants to adapt it, so we're gonna do it. But then you see Alan Ritchson, who's all but like 6'5", 3,000 pounds, and he's just a hulking beast in that show, and I absolutely love it. Okay, you you said something that made my ears perk up so much that my headphones were about to pop off my head, and that was Friday Night Lights. I That is my all-time favorite show. I have watched it 7 times in its entirety. I am more than obsessed with that series. And I am so glad that you plugged it because it almost validates everything that I say about the show because it's so good. And every time somebody, I'm actually batting 1,000 on recommendations for that show because everybody who said I don't want to watch this show, it's about football. I don't like football. I'm
It's
like, it's
not
not.
though. It's not about
Yes,
football.
no, it's about family. It's about
Yeah.
friendship. It's about community. It's about love and everything that, and it just so happens that it's got a football backdrop. You know, there's been a lot of movies and films that may have used sports as a backdrop for telling the main story with your characters. And this is definitely one of those things. And I love that show. And anytime you ever want to have like a complete episode rundown of that series, you just let me know because like I said, you said Friday Night Lights and I was like, "Oh, okay. That
Steven, I'll do you one better. I happen to be friends with quite a few of the cast members of
okay.
Friday Night Lights. Gaius Charles is a buddy of mine.
Oh, smash.
I know
Yeah.
Stacey Oristano, who played Mindy on the show, and
Mhm.
Mindy and Derek, not Mindy, sorry, Stacey and Derek Phillips, who played
Mhm.
Billy Riggins. They have
Mhm.
their, as you know,
Their
they
own,
have their
yeah.
rewatch podcast,
Mhm.
which is fantastic too. And
Yes.
I think they just had Kyle Chandler on, which is like, I was like, oh my god, y'all, I coached, and every time I see. And I just watched that show, Super Pumped, as well. That one about Uber, the one with Joseph Gordon-Levitt,
Oh, the new one.
and
Yes, yes.
I love Kyle Chandler, and I think he's low key one of the best actors, pound for pound, in the industry today. It's just, but every time I see him, I can't help but think Coach Taylor. Not that he
Yeah.
can't play other characters, but every time
Right.
like he's like, "What? Clear eyes? Well, hell, smash. Are you gonna run the ball or what?" You know, that's all I can hear in his
That's
voice. You know.
amazing. Yeah. 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 I mean, he could be in a Godzilla movie and it's still, oh, Coach Taylor's trying to fight Godzilla.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And
yeah.
thing about Friday Night Light, and I've been trying to get some of my friends to watch it as well, and they would tell me I'm not really into sports shows. And like, look, this is as much of a sports show as Ted Lasso is, you
Mhm.
know. And people love Ted Lasso because they love these characters. And just like Friday Night Lights is as much about football as Entourage was about Hollywood. Like, yeah, Entourage took place in Hollywood, but the core of Entourage, and I was talking about literally an hour ago with somebody to kind of defend Entourage. Yeah, is some of the language unacceptable now? Yes, but also this was in the mid 2000s. I'm not
Right.
excusing it. I'm just saying that's what it was. People
Sure.
openly spoke that way. But the core essence of Entourage was really the brotherhood of these four guys who grew up together. And the wish fulfillment factor was, what if all your wildest dreams came true, but you had your three best friends with you to experience it with you?
Right.
That's the core essence of Entourage, but it gets lost in the shuffle of this narrative of, oh, it's such a bro show. Yeah, it has its bro moments. Oh, there's so much nudity and sex. I'm like, no, actually, there's more nudity in the first episode of Game of Thrones and the entire series of Entourage
Yeah.
combined. So, like,
Right.
let's let, I think people, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but unfortunately, that seems to like happen quite a bit when it comes to TV shows just because of what the cover art is or whatever the perception is. So anyone out there who has not seen Friday Night Lights, I will be along with my guy Cinema Steven and bet on 1,000 on it because I'm telling you, you will fall in love with those characters. You will fall in love with the stories, and little by little, you'll see that football becomes the backdrop. So as if anyone's an aspiring writer or filmmaker, that's really how you know concoct a show over the course of 5 seasons, and also solve the problem of how do we get these high school kids out of high school? Because a lot of these shows, they want to keep them in high school for 10 years.
Mhm.
How do you get them to graduate? How do you get them to move on? It's a great case study if you're someone who wants to create a TV show or create any sort of good story.
Perfectly said. And speaking of high school, that seems like a perfect segue into the main topic because
And we did not plan that, everybody. This is a spontaneous conversation. We're just in tune that much. So, you know,
some things are kismet. You know, the destinies aligned. And I think with it's funny because you say, you know, they keep actors in high school for 10 years. And some of our movies had cast members that looked way older than the designated time period, especially if it's a movie set in high school. Some of these movies, I don't know, I think that they kind of align within high school, college, maybe post college, just somewhere around there, you know, you post grad, if you will, working into the workforce. But we are going to start our top 5 rankings, and in doing so, we're going to do the snake pattern, and we're going to start off with our number fives, and then before in traditional screen addicts fashion, we're going to have our honorable mentions before our number ones. So, as our guest, you will be able to start and finish our list. So, please, your number five.
yeah. So do you want me to do my honorable mentions first, or do you want me to go
No,
right to
we'll
the
we'll
list?
save those before number ones, just to
Okay.
kind of. Well, I mean, if you want to talk about them now, and then we could just get them out of the way, that could work too.
You know, I'm just gonna throw this caveat out there because people who may know who I am are probably aware that Freddie Prinze Jr. is one of my best friends. We have a podcast together,
Sure.
and so I took She's All That off the table, not because I don't like it, but
Right.
because it's been talked about a lot. And I could do a whole list of the Freddie Prinze Jr. '90s rom-coms.
Sure.
But I didn't. I picked one to put on this list because it's one that I felt doesn't get enough recognition, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But I just want to say that for anyone before, because I want to say that before I go into my list, because I'm like, wait, hold on, how could you not say this movie? The
Right.
reason I did that is because who knows, Cinema Steven may talk about it, but I just want to say for anyone who knows me and knows that I'm tight with Freddie, it's no slight to him by any means, but I, it's like if I go on a horror podcast and they want me to talk about my favorite movies. I mean, James Wan is one of my best friends. It's like I could do the whole list of James Wan movies, but then I'd just be super biased. I wouldn't be wrong, but I would be super biased.
Sure.
So I just want to throw that little buyer beware to any listeners who may be aware of my other ventures with my guy at PJ.
Perfect. Okay. Well, with that being said, yeah, you know what? Let's just go ahead and knock out the honorable mentions, and then we can focus on the core five. That way, we can lead up to our number ones without any interruption. So, if you have any honorable mentions that you'd like to share, we can go ahead and knock some of them out right now.
You know, with that said, I will do one honorable mention because it didn't make my top five, but it is
Mhm.
one of Freddie's movies that I felt was very enjoyable, and that was Head Over Heels.
Oh,
I,
okay.
and I thought that was, you know, looking back, it was cool to see him very much. They're following that formula, the rom coms, the meet cute and everything, the courting period and all that stuff. But I thought it was cool that he was like this badass super agent sort of guy who was
Yeah.
kind of physical and like very fit. You know, like it looked like it was a bit of a departure from his traditional rom-com roles. And that's what I really liked about it. I thought Monica Potter
Mhm.
was like the low-key MVP of that movie as
Oh
well
yeah.
because she was helped carry to drive that narrative because it really wasn't about Freddie's character. It was about through the lens of Monica Potter.
Mhm.
And if Monica wasn't up to the task, then that whole movie falls apart. Now
Right.
the script is what it is. If you watch the movie, you're gonna be like, ah, well, listen. You can nitpick anything. Trust me, you can nitpick Citizen Kane, and that doesn't take away from the essence of Citizen Kane. So just sometimes you just got to enjoy for what it is. So, Head Over Heels is one for sure. There's another one that I enjoyed at the time. Now when I watch it, I'm like, huh, that's a little weird, but Never Been Kissed with Drew
Mm,
Barrymore is
yeah.
a very enjoyable movie. But now as an adult, I'm like, hold on, this teacher was
Yeah.
willingly pursuing someone that he thought was in high school. Like this is very, very problematic.
Right.
That aside, again, this is the 90s. Not saying it's right. I'm just saying this is the stuff that was out there. I am not endorsing anything. You just never know what people can clip and use against you. But the chemistry of those two and the adoration, like the whole like adorableness of Drew Barrymore,
Mhm.
that's what really makes the movie, you know, worth watching for her. Now the subject matter, like, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
If like, first of all, someone should be calling HR, someone should be calling the police,
Right.
like on this guy. But it's like, oh, but she's actually not under 18. Like, yeah, but you thought she was.
You remember
So
how
that's the
pissed he
problem.
was? He was like so pissed
Yeah.
off whenever she made her declaration at the prom, and he's like, "Oh, wait, you're not a high
Yeah.
schooler?" I'm like, "Bro, you should be happy about this."
Yeah, maybe I should say that that's more of a horror movie than than it is
Right.
a rom com at this point. But those are a couple that I really enjoyed, and then
Okay.
I mean there were that was a decade of so many. I mean, look again, there's a lot of Freddie movies like Boys and Girls is another one, like one of my
Yeah.
honorables and stuff like that, and which I thought his chemistry with Claire Forlani was really charming,
Mhm.
and I always wish that I wish they did more stuff together,
Yeah.
you know, sort of thing. But those I guess like my three. I mean, there's those you know, that's my way of making up for it, not putting She's All That in my top five, I guess, is giving the honorable mentions to FPJ.
You know what's kind of a stretch whenever I think about Boys and Girls is the fact that I watched Past Lives, you know, the movie that's nominated for
Sure.
Best Picture. Fantastic movie, beautiful movie. And watching it, I couldn't help but think of Boys and Girls. And I was because I really love Boys and Girls because and much like a lot like Love with Ashton Kutcher and Amanda Peet, you have this situation where these characters meet over large spans of their life and then they reconnect for whatever it could be a momentary moment or a long-term thing. They may talk, they may spend time together, but then they become apart from each other yet again, but then they reconnect, and in some instances it works out, some it doesn't. But whenever I was watching Past Lives, I was like, oh, this is kind of like Boys and Girls when you know Freddie Prinze Jr. and Claire Forlani meet up in college, and then when they meet up again after they have broken up with their significant others. It seemed like a stretch. And one,
And
is shot in a certain way, but I
yeah,
couldn't help but think about that movie.
that's a great deep pull, man. And I can always appreciate the connecting universes that way
Yeah.
in an unconventional way. So I support this theory of
Thank you.
yours, and I'm in a Celine song. If you're listening, can you confirm or not confirm that Boys and Girls was an inspiration of the story structure of Past Lives? I would love to know that,
I would
and
love to know
find
that too.
because that's a great pull, man. I like that. I like that.
Again, it comes back to this particular subgenre, this time period. It was so vital to me because I was in high school around this time period. I graduated, not to date myself too much, but graduated in 2001. So I'm the
I'm
core.
O2, man. I'm right
Okay,
behind you. I'm right
so
there.
we're definitely the core audience for these types of movies, and they hit really hard in a more of an emotional way. Like my father's watching, my dad, he watched movies with me. He's kind of the one that really made me into the cinephile that I am because he loved going to the movies. And so whenever we would watch something, he would see it too, and he would think, "Oh, well, this is kind of like name your throwback from the '70s." Whenever he was my age or something like that, and so he didn't really resonate with a lot of the movies on this list because he wasn't a teenager. He wasn't in that adolescent time period wherever we are the core audience. It's kind of like when I watch stuff with my kids now. They have like a Netflix original movie that may be good, but I can't really associate with it. Like for example, To All the Boys I Have Loved. Great movie. The whole trilogy is actually really good. It's a really good series of movies. But I can't really emotionally connect to it the same way that my kids can, even though they play like Oasis, Wonderwall, or name your '90s rock song and stuff like that. That's kind of the connective tissue that I have with movies like that. But resonating with, kind of current day slang and stuff like that, it doesn't really work the same way that it does for my kids. So that's why I love sharing movies during this particular time period with them because in the end, it's much similar to what John Hughes was able to capture, that emotion, because we were all teenagers at that one point. We were all emotionally vulnerable to a person, a situation, something that made us feel angry, sad, mad. And I think that some of those best movies, it's kind of like superhero movies, heart, hero, heroics. You have the three H's in that, and there's some movies, if you have the three H's in that, it works for everything.
And if you
But
have Triple H from WWE, even better, you know?
if you have the game in the movie, and it might work even better. Yeah. But for some of my honorable mentions, you had mentioned too that I definitely had on that list, but I also had one, and it was this movie. I believe it was 2000, 2001. It was Get Over It with Kirsten Dunst, Ben Foster, Colin Hanks, and I loved this movie. It was a ridiculous send up of another Shakespearean adaptation. In this case, it was I believe it was Midsummer Night's Dream. And so this whole thing with Ben Foster's character, he's trying to get over his ex-girlfriend, and in doing so, he forms this bond with his sister's best friend, played by Kirsten Dunst. And I don't. It's such a random movie. I really enjoyed it, and I got to give a shout out to my co-host Chris, who Chris specializes in TV. So anytime that there's a in-depth discussion about movies, he's like, "My man, you go ahead and you take that one because we're gonna come back and do a TV episode." And I'm like, "Fair enough." But he absolutely loved the scene in this movie because Martin Short plays a theater director that's putting on a stage adaptation of Midsummer Night's Dream. And there's a scene where one of the nebbish kids, tech kid, wants to ask a question, and he's just raising his hand every single time. And he goes, "Put your hand down, Lil Steen," and then he just yells at him every single time. And then Chris, for somehow, some way, he to this day says, "Put your hand down, little Steve." So I had to give him a shout out for that because he still does it when I'm rambling, kind of like I'm doing right now. He says, "Put your hand down, little Steve." So Get Over It. That was one that it's not the best, but I enjoyed it. There's one indie flick called 8 Days a Week, and it's from this writer director Michael Schaefer, and it starred Kerry Russell and a young actor. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He didn't really have a long-standing career, but he's obsessed with Kerry Russell's character. They're both in high school, so he stays outside of her house every single day until she falls in love with him. So it's just a weird occurrences of neighbors, and she's coming in talking to her boyfriend. Her boyfriend, he's such a jerk, but he's like, "I'm staying here until you fall in love with me." It's just this really just random comedy. It's very very gratuitous in terms of sexuality, much like a lot of those movies were back in the day. And it's very crass, but what can we do? That's kind of the kind of not necessarily darker humor, but just that crass humor, that scatological humor that made up that particular decade. And I just really like that movie. And I noticed that it was on Peacock. So anyone curious about this movie, you can go to Peacock and watch it. It's called 8 Days a Week. Just a goofy, cute little comedy. Hard R, so don't watch it with your kids, or if you want to, it doesn't matter. But just let them know that it's going to be pretty heavy in that. But
Yeah,
you
so
know, it's
not to confuse anyone, not the Beatles song 8 Days a Week.
no,
Steve is talking about.
yeah, definitely a complete opposite of that. One's a little bit more
And it is
classier,
not
and
adapted from the Beatles song, or maybe it is. Maybe that's the darker side of
maybe it is.
who knows?
I need to contact Michael Schaefer and see if the Beatles were the inspiration for this nasty comedy.
Can we
with
get
Carrie
Paul McCartney
Russell.
on the phone? Get Paul McCartney on the phone.
Yeah,
Come
let
on.
me get my secretary. Well, I'll bug her
Hello,
later.
hello,
But
Steve. What do you want to know?
yeah,
Yes, in fact,
too.
it was from that. Thank you very much. They still owe me royalties. There we go. We have our answer from Paul
We got
McCartney.
confirmation from Paul. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank
all
you
right.
for
Thank you
chiming
for
in.
that. Yeah. For anybody watching on video, you clearly know that was not Paul McCartney.
I'll edit
But-
it in. Don't worry.
all right. All right.
But
His first appearance, ever since the Simpsons episode. So nice pull on Cinema Steve again.
I have to say that's not too bad.
I like those odds.
I think there was another one from 2000 called "Telling You," and it starred Peter Facinelli,
Yes,
Jennifer Love
yes.
Hewitt, and Dash Myhawk, and oh my gosh, I really enjoyed this movie. Now they're post grads, they're working at a pizza shop. I guess it's set in New Jersey because they got that thick New Jersey accent going on. Everybody talks like this, so forced. It's
Yeah.
not natural. It's so forced, and everybody got to know they're from New Jersey. But I just absolutely enjoy this movie, and nobody's ever really heard of it. I mean, you seem like you know what I'm talking about.
I do,
Because
and that reminded me of this other one, which is a bit of a hybrid. So there is a high school element, but it does take place post grad. When you said post grad, it reminded me of this movie with Kristen Bell called You Again.
Oh,
Which,
yes.
it starts with this high school element, and then it's after the fact, and it really is. And I think this is Andy Fickman who directed. This is Andy Fickman really in his prime. This is when he was
Right.
doing the game plan, and a lot of these really solid kind of mid-level studio movies, which unfortunately that budget level doesn't exist anymore. I wish that would. But You Again is a great sleeper hit, and you got Kristen Bell, Jamie Lee Curtis. Like you got a great cast of that movie. But I really think the core essence of that was like a beautiful story about how it's so fascinating to me how high school really does shape us, and it sticks with us even if we graduate. Doesn't matter what year you graduated, whatever feelings you have at that moment of time, because we're so impressionable and trying to figure out who we are.
Mhm.
It's going to stick with us no matter what. It's a matter of how we interpret it as we get older to come to terms with it. And I feel like You Again really captured that in terms of letting go of these feelings, because people can grow up and mature. Sometimes they don't, but You Again, thank you for reminding me of that indirectly with your post grad comment. That's what
Well,
happened.
and you indirectly reminded me of 10 Years with,
Yep.
Chris Pratt. And that was actually another one of those movies that was really good too. And it's funny to think that they're 10 years post high school graduation,
Yeah.
because I think they're like 20 post high school now. But, movies like that are really good. And I think that was pretty much it for my list of honorable mentions. So if you want to go ahead and start our top 5 list, so go ahead and kick it off with your number 5.
Yeah, let's let a little drum roll. Number 5, coming in at number 5, fresh off my whole, not having She's All That on here, but honoring my guy, Freddie Prinze Jr. Number 5 is Summer Catch. Now,
yeah.
Summer Catch is a solid flick. And again, we're going back to what we're talking about with sports movies or sports shows. This movie's just as much about baseball as Friday Night Lights is about football. There is probably a little more sports in this one than comparatively to some of the sports shows that we know. But I'm a big baseball fan. I think this is a time when Freddie and Matt Lillard were working together a lot. So this is pre-Scooby-Doo, but I think they had done She's All That right before this. And there's something about this movie, really at the core of it, Ryan Dunn, Freddie's character, is really a guy dealing with grief because he had lost his mom. He's disconnected from his father. And I know Freddie pulls from a lot from his own life for those sorts of things, which I don't have to get into detail on. If you all know the story, then you know the story. But Summer Catch was always one that I always had a lot of love for. She's All That gets the main headline, and rightfully so in many ways, because it really is this iconic piece. But Summer Catch, I feel like, even though it was Freddie Prinze Jr., almost, I feel like at the peak of Freddie Prinze Jr. mania, I don't know if a lot of people really saw it even in real time, you know,
Mm.
and I don't even know if people now know about it. And again, you do not have to be a baseball fan to enjoy this movie, but there is a big bit of a charm to it, and I do feel like that comes down to the cast chemistry because I think we have Wilmer Valderrama, Jessica Biel as his love interest. There's a lot of good stuff in this movie, and the two guys I can't remember the names that play his best friends in the movie, the ones that kind of ground him. They're the voices of reason. I just felt like the characters in that movie really lend their charm to it. So Summer Catch is my number five. Coming in at number four is one that, again, unless you experience this movie in real time, I don't know if a lot of people know about it, but that's Sliding Doors with Gwyneth
Mm.
Paltrow. Because basically, anyone who isn't familiar, Sliding Doors is really hinges upon if she caught this train, if she didn't catch this train, what that would have done to her life, how different would her life be one way or another. And I think anyone who's anyone can identify with that. I mean, you don't have to look like Gwyneth Paltrow to identify with that. I think we all have moments of, oh, if to use an athlete example, if I didn't get injured in this big game, how different my life would have been, sort of thing. And I feel like that's such a great exploration, and it's a great character exploration. I think, and it's one of those that still holds up. It's a bit confusing at first, so anybody watching, let it breathe, give it time. But I feel like Sliding Doors is very much it's a bit of a sleeper hit. I know it's crazy to say because it's Gwyneth Paltrow. It's the '90s, and Gwyneth has always been a huge name. But I've always liked that movie, and I always like the premise of what if, kind of answering this what if scenario, and also showing the two possible scenarios. And I will say there was a Hallmark movie that completely took that framing device. It was called A Tale of Two Christmases.
Mm.
Yes, I watch Hallmark movies. I love Hallmark movies because you know why?
Same.
Because they're not trying to fool anybody. You know what you're gonna get. If
Right.
you're gonna go into a Hallmark movie thinking it's gonna be Macbeth, well, that's on you, bro. They never try to misrepresent themselves. Like, hey, it's gonna be by minute 15. There's the meet cute. By like the seventh act, all is lost. You think they're not gonna get together, only to have it all be made up for in the eighth act, which is the one and only time our two leads can kiss. That's what you're gonna get with a Hallmark movie. If you're expecting something else, well, I don't know what to tell you. But that's why I do love Hallmark movies. And when that one came out, I was like, hey, wait a minute. Somebody saw Sliding Doors and retrofitted that to a Christmas movie, which I thought was pretty brilliant, if I may say so. Number three, I cheated a little bit because I know we were saying 97. This one's from 95, is Angus. And
Mm.
I know you know this movie
Mhm.
because I think anyone from our generation, because you graduated '01, I graduated '02. I remember seeing this. I was in elementary school. This is like we're preteens. We're getting to the age of starting to really discover girls, and really that veil of is lifted because we're realizing, oh, we are going to start being judged by our status and who we hang out with. And for me, I didn't really understand that part of it to that degree, but there's something that resonated with it because me, look, I'm a Korean American dude who grew up in white suburbia. Not many people who look like me, and even though people weren't actively reminding me that I didn't look like them, I always just knew that I looked different from everybody else. And I knew that that was going to be something that I'm just going to have to deal with. And I still deal with to this day to a certain degree. But I remember watching that in a weird way. It just felt seen. Charlie Talbert just does a fantastic job as Angus. Just this, I'm a sucker for these kind of everyman,
Yeah.
sort of movies because I can't relate to somebody who looks like Tom Cruise or Justin Hartley or someone like that. Like all power to them because they're fantastic actors. But there's something about this humble beginning sort of guy, and he's really just trying to figure out who he is. But he's trying to figure out who he is while everyone's telling him he's this, but he doesn't even know who he is. That, but everyone's bestowing this unfair label on him. It was almost very Carrie in a way because they,
Mhm.
as you know, the whole shtick of that is they jokingly nominate him for like prom king and
Build
stuff
up.
like that, just so they can embarrass him. But it's one of those movies that again for today's audiences they probably don't know about it. If you grew up in the '90s, I think you definitely know about it. And it has one of my favorite Green Day songs, which you can only find on the Angus soundtrack, which is J.A.R. Jason Andrew Relva. It's a fantastic tune. I'm a big Green Day fan, as I think most kids who grew up in the '90s love Green Day. Uh, Dookie, one of the best albums of all time. I'll just go out there and say that. So Angus is another great one, and you really feel for this kid, and then you really admire him by the end of that movie because he really does take ownership of who he is. He doesn't care what others say, and you also see a pre Dawson's Creek and pre I Don't Want Your Life Varsity Blues James Vanderbeek. So if
Yes,
that's
you do.
if Charlie Talbot was an incentive and James Vanderbeek is whatever gets you to watch this movie, that's all I'm going to throw out there at you. Coming in at number two is 10 Things I Hate About You. Uh, this is going back to Shakespeare adaptations, as you touched on earlier. And that really was the charm of a lot of these 90s rom-coms. They were based on classic literature. And like Clueless was based on Emma. And in this case, it was based on Taming of the Shrew. And this ensemble cast of Joseph Gordon-Levitt, the late great Heath Ledger, rest in power Heath Ledger, Julia Stiles, Larissa Olenek, Andrew Keegan, like you have all like the great teen idols of this movie, but the fact that they had Shakespeare, really the OG creator of them all. I'm sure there may be people pre-Shakespeare, just like there's people pre-Socrates. But for all we know, Shakespeare really was the OG of all the story archetypes that we know of today. And this movie just, again, at the core of it is who am I? They're going to be defined by who they're associated with. Just like Joseph Gordon-Levitt's friend of the movie makes the deal with Andrew Keegan's character. He's like, "Hey, I do this for you." Then I say hi to you. You say hi. It's like, "Oh, I get it. You're cool by association." Again, it's
Right.
going back to the high school dynamic of, which isn't too far off from Hollywood, if I dare say so, because optics are everything in high school. Just as in Hollywood, optics are pretty much the driving force of a lot of things. I know you know this, Stephen, because I know you're a huge movie buff like I am, and you notice the patterns that go on in this business. But there's a charm to that. But again, it's very much everyone's trying to figure out who they are. It's this great ensemble cast, even though we really focus mostly on Larissa Olenek's character and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. But it's really everybody stripping away these masks that we put on, these facades that we put up, this body armor that we put on, and slowly letting that down for the right person. And there's real beauty in that. So 10 Things I Hate About You is my number 2. And coming in at number 1, which I don't think you're going to have any problem with, I don't think anyone on this list is going to have a problem with, is Can't Hardly Wait, which in this era of rom-coms, this one was always like really near and dear to me. It's probably my favorite of all of them. Look, I know that's blasphemous. Again, Freddie's my guy. I love She's All That, but Can't Hardly Wait. And going back to the whole everyman thing, which Ethan Embry played perfectly as the Preston Myers. I felt like I was Preston Myers, and we all had this person we admired from afar.
Of course.
And this, you were talking about wish fulfillment. This was almost the ultimate wish fulfillment movie because I was like,
Yeah.
I'm friendly with Ethan Embry too, and I had this joke, which I wasn't really joking, but I said it as a joke. I'm like, I have a bit of a bone to pick with you. He said, well, what? He starts laughing. I was like, what's that? I was like, listen, man. First off, I loved your performance in Can't Hardly Wait. I love your performance as an actor in general. But that being said, you gave people like me very false hope in high school, thinking, oh, I could just write a heartfelt letter to my high school crush, and that's gonna work. Guess what, man? That doesn't really work because I did try that, and it did not work. But it's okay. That's not Ethan Embry's fault, really, or maybe it is. Or maybe it's Deborah Kaplan's fault. Just kidding. Deborah's a buddy of mine too, so shout out to Deborah. But Can't Hardly Wait. There's something charming about that, but also just the cinematography and the way that there's this whole sequence. If anyone hasn't seen the movie, and if you have, this description will definitely be vivid in your memory. The part where the letter finds itself from being stuck on someone's shoe, gets on this beer keg, and it rolls in while like Smash Mouth is playing, and somehow lands perfectly in the bowl right in front of Jennifer Love Hewitt, just so
Yeah.
she can pick it up and be like, "Hey, wait a minute, this is a letter for me." You don't see stuff like that in any movie anymore, not just rom-coms, but any movie where they're gonna block out this scene and have this sort of practical way and this almost practical gag of getting this plot device to this person, this MacGuffin to this person. And that sort of creativity is not really existent now. And I tell people, watch Can't Hardly Wait for some of the things they do and just some of the visuals, like when Preston Myers talks about the first time he saw Amanda Beckett. And it's like this dramatic rain coming down as Walking on the Sun by Smash Mouth is playing. He's like, yeah, she had the same like fruit pastries I
Strawberry
did,
Pop-Tart.
yeah. And I love my strawberry Pop Tarts. Let me tell you, strawberry frosted Pop Tarts.
Yeah.
Like, they're bad for you. They're not great for your health. But back in the day, man, that was my jam. And I'm always gonna have mad love for Pop Tarts. And y'all, Pop Tarts, y'all should sponsor my guy Cinema Steven. I'm just gonna throw that out there as well. But
Appreciate it.
Can't Hardly Wait. Again, going back to like the everyman, someone relatable, like the Preston Myers character, and the fact that he got the girl at the end, because this showed that the nice guy can finish first, just like very Ducky and Pretty in Pink. You want the girl to end up with the nice guy, and it's nice to see that through this, even though it looked like all was lost and Preston just had to let it go, that it was able to come full circle for him, and just a really really sweet story. But I just remember watching that and me kind of being driven by, oh, I just want to be liked. I wish a girl would like me as I was growing up. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I just need to meet the right one who's going to see past all the exterior stuff and see that, oh, I'm the right guy. There's something really endearing about that, and Ethan Embry played it perfectly. And also, fun fact, which I don't know if you know this or anybody out there, that was initially offered to Freddie, but Freddie was, I think he was busy with something else. But they initially offered the role of Preston to Freddie on Can't
Interesting.
Hardly Wait. Yeah, which would have worked. It just would have been very different.
Hmm.
I don't know how. I think Freddie could pull off playing the everyman if he wants to, if he puts his focus on it. But the way he was cast was the way it was cast. And so yeah, that's my top five, and I can't wait to hear yours.
I feel terrible. I should have said I'll go first because we should have ended on yours because your list is unrivaled. And as a matter of fact, when we were going through some of these together, I was completely blown away by your pick of Angus
Yeah,
because Angus is a movie that nobody has ever really heard of it. Even people that I grew up with, some may be familiar with it, but they've all but forgotten that movie. And I don't know why Warner Archives hasn't distributed any kind of um, you know, showcasing for it or stream for it. But I absolutely love that movie. The soundtrack of that movie, like you said, is incredible. And your Can't Hardly Wait number one. I had to take a back step because you're the guest, but that easily could have been my number one too,
yeah.
because I absolutely love that movie. It hit me right as a freshman in high school, and I thought, whoa, is this what my senior year is gonna be like? Am I gonna go to an absolute rager like this? No, we ended up going bowling or something, and I had dinner with my parents, which is nice, but I didn't, eat any kind of special watermelon and sing Guns N' Roses with a bunch of strangers or anything. But that movie,
Oh yeah, Charlie Korsmo, the kid
Charlie
from Dick
Korsman,
Tracy,
that's
like
right.
killing it
And
on the mic.
yeah, absolutely. And Hook. And I mean, it's just so funny to see him in that position at the time because even when the movie came out, I didn't even really associate him with Dick Tracy or Hook. But then I was like, this guy looks really familiar. And then you look at the credits, you're like, oh my god, that's the kid from Dick Tracy. That's the kid. Like this is crazy. And I just absolutely love that movie. It's very very near and dear to my heart, and I'm glad that it was your number one because you were saying that it may seem blasphemous or whatever, but I absolutely disagree. I think that it's a perfect pick. It's a perfect number one. It showcases a lot of different stereotypes intentionally, and I think that's kind of the joke about it, because nowadays you'll watch something where things are or characters are stereotypical, but they're almost done in a forceful sense. And back then, it just seemed like natural, because there's a scene, and I know it's not a rom-com by any means. There is some romance, but the scene in Disturbing Behavior where James Marsden is talking to Nick Stahl about the certain social classes or the social groupings of people. And I thought, man, that's so funny because when I think about high school back in the day, it did seem like that. It seemed like everybody was grouped into a certain category together. And I mean, maybe not so much nowadays. I don't know. I don't really go to high schools
Well, I
anymore.
would hope
And
not.
yeah, and I'm like, I'm not. Hey, I'm doing research
Are
on
you the teacher from Never Been Kissed? Like, what's going on, Steven?
right. Michael Vartan needs more additional research. But no, I was thinking, based on what my kids had told me, they're like, yeah, social classes don't really. It's more like I said that, like it's a social class system. Maybe the rich kids hang with the rich kids, more or less. How you look or what you like versus financial stability or whatever that may be. But again, your top five is very well done. And I kind of don't want to share mine, but I will for the sake of the podcast because I feel like there's a couple in here that do stand the test of time. Number five on my list is Whatever It Takes. Now, Whatever It Takes, again, it's a Cyrano de Bergerac type of, Steve Martin, Roxanne updated version of those stories where you have Shane West before he really broke out and Walk to Remember, and James Franco. And Freaks and Geeks, I guess it was about the same time period, but he wasn't really playing the same character as he was in Freaks and Geeks. And he basically he likes his friend, Shane West likes his cousin, so hey, let's work something out. I'll help you, you help me. And then of course realizing that Marla Sokoloff and is the one that he wants to be with. And the movie's fun. It's fine. I always enjoyed it. It has a very young Aaron Paul in the movie, which is crazy to think, because of where he ended up becoming with his career. I think he did a show that was semi-successful called, Breaking Bad, and I think he fared
Well,
pretty
yeah,
well doing so.
never heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you should check it out. It
Oh,
might be
okay.
worth your time. But whatever it takes. It was just one that I was always just rewatching, and I think that's the other thing about this. Like the movie may not be that great, but there was a certain rewatchability factor towards the film with me personally, and whatever it takes, I was just always watching that movie. Jodie Lynn O'Keefe, I thought was great. She was really good in these roles where, somewhat villainous temptress type of characters, and
Well, you
and
still
even
want
in
to be her friend though. Like,
right,
she was able to toe that line of being that, but not. But you're also like, okay, she's really mean, but I want her to like me. Like,
right.
it's a very special kind of actor that can do that for sure.
She's like pre Regina George and
Yeah.
Mean Girls, and I think that she really and she cranks it up to 1,000 and whatever it takes. Like she's just semi crazy in that role, and I think she was really fun to put herself the way that she did because I know it's difficult to say that Jodie Lynn O'Keefe downplayed her physical appearance, but she was doing a lot of things in that movie to make herself, I guess, quote unquote, ugly for the main character to realize, oh, well, you're not really who I want to be with after all. But I really enjoyed Whatever It Takes. Number 4 is a movie given shout out back to Vinny Chase from Entourage. This is going to be Drive Me Crazy
Yes.
with Adrian Grenier and Melissa Joan Hart. Well, flip that, Melissa Joan Hart, because she's listed first in the credits, and I'll give her proper respect in putting
And she
her
was
back in
also
that.
in Can't Hardly Wait.
And
Yeah.
she was. And that's so funny about her role in that movie because I remember the trailers for Can't Hardly Wait. Like she was heavily featured in the trailers. Like, hey, will you sign my yearbook? Yeah, yeah. And they're like kind of pushing her around and doing some of the sight gags for the trailer. And I thought, oh, well, that's cool that Melissa Joan Hart's going to be
It's like
in this
Sabrina's in this
movie.
movie. Fuck yeah.
Right. And then it's just like, well, where's Clarissa? Because she's not in this whole thing. She's just more of like a glorified cameo in Can't Hardly Wait. But would drive me crazy. She took front center. This was her first role, in a leading position, and I thought she was great. I think I've always been a fan of Melissa Joan Hart, and it was, I mean, granted, she kind of grew up alongside of us, with
Yeah.
Clarissa, then with Sabrina. She's doing these pop culture iconic shows that just lived in the zeitgeist forever. I mean, they still talk about doing a resurgence of Sabrina with her in it, not so much the Netflix version, but I absolutely love Drive Me Crazy. It's almost like one of those things again. It's like, look, you work with me, I'll work with you. You help me get the guy, I'll help you get the girl back. And I could watch that movie just nonstop. And it also helped me learn the terminology of bicentennial being 200 because they had the
Yeah.
whole bicentennial prom thing. And, shout out to Robin Williams before this was before Bicentennial Man. So
All
for
right.
when I
Melissa
was
Joan Hart
watching
did
it,
it first, everybody.
she did it first. And I thank you for helping me learn something new. And I really love Drive Me Crazy. And there's a scene in there where he's at this bar with her watching a band, the Donnas are playing, and I loved how Ali Larter's character Dulcie just doesn't give a damn about Chase. That's Adrian Grenier. He just does not give a damn about the guy
That's funny
anymore.
that his name's Chase and he becomes Vincent Chase
That
later
is
on in
funny. Yeah, I
Entourage.
just I just put that together. I'm like, wait, was his name Chase in that too? It was. And so Melissa Joan Hart just goes up there and kisses him in front of her. And I don't know if I just like the sensational drama sometimes, but maybe I do. But I just always love that scene. I'm like, man, now that's somebody that has your back. That's somebody that you can fall in love with. But I don't want to go on too much about Drive Me Crazy. And of
No,
course, it
but
was
thank you
named.
for bringing that up. I remember
Yeah.
that trailer because this is when Britney Mania was
Oh
really at
yeah.
its peak, and the trailer was her song "You Drive Me Crazy." I was like,
Crazy. Yeah.
and we were wanting to see it just because of it, because I was a Britney Spears fan and
Oh yeah.
still am to that degree,
Mhm.
and that was enough for me to be like, okay, Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I don't know this guy. I didn't know who Adrian Grenier was at the time, but
Yeah.
you got that with the Britney song. Good enough for me. Let's go.
Yeah. And it was a hit. It was a hit.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I don't know if it still stands the test of time, but I love that movie. But
Maybe
number
we can
4.
revisit. Like, does it hold up? Maybe we can revisit and do like a rewatch together and see if it
Yeah,
holds up.
absolutely. I would be down for it. And it's when you think about certain movies holding up, maybe socially, like do they hold up to the climate of, modern day viewership? I think that it's okay. I mean, after watching, people watch Euphoria, I think, okay, now you really just can't be offended by anything. I
Yeah.
think you're gonna be okay watching some teen rom-com from the 90s,
Yeah.
I don't I don't think there's anything too bad about it. Oh, what were you gonna say something? Or
No, no, no. I was
oh,
just
I'm so
listening.
sorry. Okay. But my number 3, now I know you didn't wanna shout out Freddie, but I don't know him like you do. I don't know him at all. So I could just say this from a straight viewer's perspective that She's All That is my number 3. Because in my opinion, She's All That was that movie in 1997 that really started this renaissance of teen comedies because it was a massive, massive hit. And I grew up in a smaller city in Texas. So anything we got was mainstream. It was never a lot of indie fare. We had to go to Dallas to watch that kind of stuff. So we were getting a lot of the mainstream media films. And I remembered when that movie came out, everybody was talking about it. All the girls wanted to see it. All the guys didn't want to admit they wanted to go see it, but they all saw it. And I think that movie, because that's almost the point where a lot of these movies started to follow suit. It was only that and Can't Hardly Wait. Those two movies are the ones that I really think helped jettison these types of productions to be made because they were huge at the box office. That's all that the producers see. Oh, it was number one hit. It
Hmm.
came in way over budget. Let's crank out another one. Let's see what else we got. Let's see what other kind of adaptations of Shakespeare we can do. And She's All That. It plays into those tropes, with Rachel Lee Cook, the ponytail, the dirty overalls, like all those goofy things. Because I remembered when I saw that, and I was a comic book video guy even in high school. So how she was at the beginning. I'm like, why are they saying she's a freak? She's really cute.
I
Like,
was
what
like,
are you
she's
talking about?
gorgeous. Like, what are you?
Yeah, I was like, what are you talking
I was like,
about?
and her brother's Roman Roy. What's going on here?
Right. This guy's gonna grow up to be doing some nasty shit in his office.
Yeah,
I
he's
can
gonna
tell you
send really
that much.
weird photos to
Yeah.
to him in
But
twice.
but hey, he's gonna surprise everybody at the Emmys in the end. So good for her little brother. And
And her dad's Kevin Pollak. It's like
yes,
it's like
just
she was the one.
she is the one, and he can do any kind of impression that you want, and probably of the same people in the cast. But I really love She's All That. I like and again, that's much similar to some of these movies, especially like 10 Things I Hate About You, where you had a cast of people that went on to be even bigger stars than they were. It was just um an amalgamation of actors like Gabrielle Union, Dule Hill.
Mhm.
Of course, Matthew Lillard's in there, stealing the show, just being funny,
Give it to me,
like
baby.
give it to me, baby. I mean, my
And
God,
then
I
late
can't.
great Paul Walker as
Yes,
well.
of course, and this is a movie where he was in that weird position too at the time, where it's like post Meet the Deedles, pre Varsity Blues, and of course pre Fast and the Furious, where he
Yeah.
really just kind of blew up. But it was funny because I remembered even my wife, she's like, I don't give a damn that Paul Walker was an asshole and She's All That. He was hot as hell. And I was like, yeah, he kind of has that energy going for it. But
You
every
could see even then that he was a star, though. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely
you're just like there was something like he had that Steve McQueen
right,
leading man sort of presence, which is fitting because as we know, Steve McQueen did Bullet,
of
and then
course,
Paul
the
did some
Mustang.
movies
Yeah,
about fast cars that you may or may not seen.
I
They've only
think
made
they
like
went
20 of
on
them.
to have a run too.
Yeah, I think they made us pretty solid run.
But with Freddie Prinze Jr., his position as Zack Seiler in that movie, I think it works well because of just his physical stature. He's a good-looking guy. He has this very athletic, perspective to himself, his physical presence. That's why I think when someone like Ethan Embry was casted as Preston, that makes sense to me because you
Yeah,
need someone that isn't the superhero, if you will. You have to have somebody that's a little bit kind of laid back down. But within She's All That, you needed that guy that could be the jock and tough and strong, but then still have a bit of sensitivity towards him. And I
yeah,
think that's
you're
why.
so right, Steven. Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, 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 go for it.
Oh no, I was gonna say like in some ways Zach Seiler is almost like the antithesis of that character archetype of this jock because he was the jock, but he's also the
Mhm.
class president,
Mhm.
third or fourth highest GPA in their
Right.
graduating class,
Oh yeah.
and really you see someone who is very hyper aware that they're close to the end of high school, this very safe bubble they're in,
Mhm.
which a lot of times it's lost on people, especially people that are very cool in high school. I was not cool in high school, so I don't know what that's like. I can't speak to it, but I know that I could feel that vicariously through others when they saw that this period of time was ending. Oh, who am I outside of this? And his character's trying to figure that out. And I feel like his character's almost haunted by this image that has been created of him at this school. But I think he also knows that And he does know that because he makes the speech at the end that
Mhm.
once they leave there, once commencement's over, no one cares if he was captain of the soccer team. No one cares if
Right.
he's class president. He's got to figure out who he is on his own 2 feet. And that's the really fascinating thing about that character that I think people gloss over because Freddie did so many of these movies. So people
Mm,
try to unilaterally place whatever label on the characters he's played. But
sure.
Zach is he's a pretty compelling and complex character when you really get down to the layers of it. And also, fun fact: Milo Ventimiglia has a very small role in this movie as one of the soccer players in the soccer
Oh,
scene. So
that's awesome. I didn't even recognize him. But I guess if it's a small part, I'm gonna go back and see if I can find him. That's
it's in the
pretty
part
good.
where he misses the shot in the
Oh,
soccer
towards
game,
the end.
which
Okay.
is funny to me because I was like, wait, aren't they graduated? Usually, soccer's a fall sport. Like
You're
what? It's like,
done.
it's
Yeah.
like what's going on? It's like it seemed very out of place for them.
Yeah, because it's like you can't be this mad about practice. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on
We
here?
talking about practice?
Like you're graduating next week. Prom's Friday. What the hell's going on with the
It's like y'all
scheduling?
ain't going to state. Like what's going on here?
No, you're done. This is just rec time. Maybe they're just that's Paul Walker. You know, he's just that competitive.
Screw you, Zach. It's like for 4 years I watched you trick people with you were some sort of god around here. This time you're gonna lose. You're going down, asshole. Like
Man,
I
I
think
love
that's
that.
something what he said.
Yeah, I love that scene because that's when Zach's like really, oh, I do love Laney, you piece of shit. You're not gonna just take. He's like, oh,
Yeah.
because that Bogster man. He's like, I'm gonna take it for the ride. He's like, if you don't, do you mind if I do? He's like, don't you fuck touch. You know that man. I love that movie. I can just quote the whole thing. We'll add that to the playlist of the Drive Me Crazy. But so moving
Yes.
on, I'm gonna probably run through these real quick. The number two on my list is
Oh,
a
just
movie. Oh yes, go ahead.
I'm gonna we can go over. Don't I know I said 2 to 3, but we can go
Oh
over.
okay,
Don't
okay,
feel rushed. We're good. We're good. We're good.
okay.
I'm good. Yeah.
Great, great.
Sorry. Back to one.
Number two, I on my list is a movie that not a lot of people know about, and it has two of the most popular movie stars of all time. And it's an indie movie that came out, I believe, in around 98, 99. I should have got the actual date, but it's this movie called Overnight Delivery, and it has Reese Witherspoon and Paul Rudd. And this movie is just a movie that I caught on, HBO or whatever my super legal cable scrambler had at the time, and I was like, "What is this? This is funny." And because I recognize Reese Witherspoon from Freeway and Fear, so watching those two movies, you're never gonna forget Reese Witherspoon. I'm not even gonna lie. But so I'm watching this movie. Paul Rudd. Oh, that's Josh from Clueless. What's going on here? And it's about this guy who is so pissed off that he thinks his girlfriend, who is at another college, is cheating on him, that he enlists the aid of Reese Witherspoon to send an overnight care package via FedEx, but it wasn't FedEx because of copyright issues. And he basically sends this package to his girlfriend, and it's just a really rank and nasty letter. She puts like a fake use condom in this thing. Like it's just a Polaroid of them topless holding each other. And he was like, why are you doing this? You barely even know me. She's like, because I don't like girls that do that sort of a thing. So Christine Taylor plays his girlfriend, right? So you see Christine Taylor, and she's beautiful Christine Taylor, very very put together, I guess almost Sweet Valley High type of archetype that she's
It's a
playing
great way
here.
to put it. Yeah.
And she he sends the overnight package to her, and he realizes that she wasn't cheating on him after all. Now this is pre Road Trip, people. Like Road Trip came out in '01. Exact same plot. Whenever I saw
Mm-hmm.
Road Trip, semi pissed off because I'm like, whoa. This is overnight delivery. Like, what's going on here?
Hey, Todd Phillips, you got some explaining to do, buddy.
Yeah,
Come
he
on now.
does. You know what? I'm going to talk to Todd about it. Maybe overnight delivery was his inspiration for this. Just 3 years earlier. Maybe people forgot. But they go on this road trip to extract the package or to cut it off, to intercept it before it gets delivered to his girlfriend. And the best thing about this movie, in my opinion, was the fact that Larry Drake plays the courier, the one that's delivering this specific package to Christina Lisa's address. And he's a very sweet man in this movie. Now, if anybody doesn't know Larry Drake, let me tell you, this is Dr. Giggles, people. Like Larry Drake is Durant in the Darkman movies. Like this guy is a badass dude. He is scary as shit. And he just has this natural creepiness to him. He's Santa Claus in my favorite episode of Tales from the Crypt, where he plays Santa Claus in the Robert Zemeckis episode. And this guy is like a horror meister. He's so good at being the villain. But in this movie, he's just a really nice guy who wants to deliver this package. So it was really nice seeing him in a more calm and just pleasant demeanor. Although his all kinds of things happen to him, he looks terrible by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to spoil it just in case anybody wants to watch it. But overnight delivery, and I guess I don't really need to say that in their journey together, Paul Rudd and Reese Witherspoon have a bit of a connection. And well, you know how that kind of thing goes.
Yeah.
But I just absolutely love their chemistry together. And they were in that James L. Brooks movie, I guess it was about 10 years ago. And what was it? How did it that James L. Brooks movie that just did not really resonate with the audiences. But this movie, Overnight Delivery, I really wanted them to be in more stuff together, and I waited 15 years, and it didn't really work out to their benefit. But Overnight
They
Delivery,
should have had a storyline where Rachel's sister, because they both ended up on Friends, like where Rachel's sister was maybe friends with Mike back in the day, and then they should have tied those loose ends together.
Oh my god, that would have been perfect. I didn't even think about that. Like, oh, did you ever get that package over? No, you were there. That would have
What are
been
you talking
great.
about? We don't talk about that.
Like, what package? And I forgot everything that we put in that package.
And Joey's like, "What do you mean? What package? What's going on here?"
That's pretty good. I like this revisionist. We should revise every Friends episode to our own personal.
All the Paul Rudd stuff, because
just the Paul Rudd, yeah.
Yeah, the Paul Rudd, like maybe there was like they really did, like Rachel Green's younger sister did know Mike from back in the day, and maybe that's the epilogue of that show.
Right.
Or maybe they got to have Paul Rudd appear on like morning show, because I know that Jennifer Aniston and Reese have that show together.
That's
like,
true.
Where's Paul Rudd? I was like, bring in Paul Rudd, because Paul Rudd could have easily. I don't know if you watched the morning show, but they brought in John Hamm in season 3, total side quest from Steven's Top List, everybody. But I was like, Paul Rudd could have played that part too.
Yeah.
Like Paul Rudd can play anything. Put Paul Rudd in whatever at this point.
Crudup went in there and stole his story from
Oh my god. Well, also Billy Crudup is that
he's
dude.
great. Yeah.
He's the goods for sure.
He is really good. But
Never mind.
So, let's think.
Sorry,
now
Paul.
my top 5 Paul Rudd movies to save face. But my number 1 pick is a movie, and we haven't really brought his name up, even though he's appeared in multiple films that we've already discussed, and that is Jason Biggs. Now, Jason Biggs, of course, was popular for American Pie. Really shot him to superstardom. I didn't pick American Pie because I didn't really see that as like a rom-com per se. It's more of like a buddy type of comedy, and there are moments of saccharine sweetness, especially towards the end of every single one of them, where one of the main characters has a really revealing notion of admiration for their significant other. The
come to
first
Jesus
one,
moment, if you will,
right?
too.
Like
Yeah.
the first one, Chris Klein leaves his lacrosse game to go sing in the choir. And then it's episode 2. What is this, fucking Star Wars? American Pie, episode 2, the band camp. Whenever Jim leaves Nadia, who I'm sure a lot of guys in the theater are like, oh, bro, what the hell are you doing? And then he goes to Michelle, played by Allison Hannigan, at her band recital. Like, I love that scene, though. I was like,
Me
okay,
too.
that's pretty good. That's sweet. My other buddies, these Cro-Magnon cavemen, they're just like, why would he leave Shannon Elizabeth? I'm like, bro, it's love. Just shut up. You're ruining the movie. You're like the asshole that he hits with the trombone.
I love Chris Klein in part 1 because I like Chris Klein a lot. I think Chris Klein is an underrated actor, especially with comedy, because he makes it look really easy.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're really good at something, it could be a double-edged sword, because when you make it look easy, people think you're phoning it in, which is really the opposite. I think Chris put in the work from what I can tell, but also just naturally had this timing. And I just love at the end when it's like, guys, I think we're falling in love. Like, and I was like, the way he delivered, it was very kind of Keanu Reeves, like,
that was the
sort of
comparison
energy,
back then.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was good. He's like, I'll just say we had a great night together. You're like, you damn gentleman, that was really nice of you.
Okay, so it's another side quest, and I know you're going to reveal your number 1 officially, which even though I think I know what it is.
Sure.
We used to have the biggest debate about that line in American Pie. They said, I don't think he, no, he did. He just chose not to tell his friends about it. That was my interpretation of that.
Right.
With him and Mina Savari's character. But I was like, no, he just didn't get in, and he was content with it. Like, no, like the thing is, he really does love this girl. He doesn't want to objectify her or like be this whole thing like she was some sort of conquest. It's like, no, I actually care for her. So I'm going to withhold that information and just say we had a great night. And so he doesn't say they didn't. He just says they had a great night.
Right, and Thomas Ian Nicholas actually has a line in that says, "Don't worry, man, you'll get there one day," or "Don't worry, man, it'll happen one day,"
It's like,
implying
whatever,
that
Rowan Gardner, break your arm
right,
again.
yeah, go hit the Cubs are sucking without you right now, bro. And so he, uh, I think in the revelation of that line, his friends are like, "Oh well, man, Oz, huh, top dog over here didn't even get any." But I think that's like what the implication is whenever he says, "Don't worry, it'll happen one day." And he's like,
It's
"Okay,
very
cool."
much the spinning top in Inception, and we can debate
Yeah.
about it till the end of time.
Did Oz have sex? Damn it, Nolan! Why didn't you put that in Inception?
You really
He's
dropped the ball there, Chris. Come
Nobody's
on.
answering any of our questions. It's really irritating.
Our phone lines are open, everybody. Come on.
Call into the hotline of movies that have ended 20 plus years ago.
Even though we're not recording or we're not live on the air, our phone
Right.
lines are open.
You need answers. We don't have any for you.
But you can
it
still
is,
call.
yeah, it is funny you mentioned Mina Suvari, and I also mentioned Jason Biggs because they are both in my number one pick, which is actually Loser. Loser is a
Yes.
movie directed by Amy Heckerling, who most people don't recognize that name, which is an absolute shame because her filmography consists of some great movies, including Look Who's Talking, Clueless, and there was even that one that Michelle Pfeiffer did in the early 2000s, like I Could Never Be Your Woman, with a very young Saoirse Ronan playing her daughter. Paul Rudd's in that as well. That movie is so underrated. It's so good. But Loser is a movie that Jason Biggs, title Loser, he goes to college in New York City, and he's a bit out of his element because he's a little farm boy from, I don't know, name your town in the Midwest, I guess. And he doesn't really come off too stereotypical in that regard. I mean, he's just a little bit unfamiliar with the nuances of social climate and that time period, especially in the big city life. Like he's not used to the people around him. So obviously when you're that different, you get shunned and you get labeled quote unquote loser. And then he meets Mina Suvari's character, who is having a tumultuous affair with Greg Kinnear, who is the resident king of slime balls in movies like this. Like he was so good at playing a bad guy. Even in something like You've Got Mail or Someone Like You, he's always good at being this very, like, you get why women love him. Like you get he's so handsome, he's so charismatic. But damn, he is a real
He
jerk.
stole Ross's girlfriend on Friends too to bring it back to Friends.
Aisha Tyler, man, this is getting deep, and I am
But
getting
then
pissed.
he plays this sensitive artist, a sensitive gay artist at that, and as good as it gets.
Good as it gets. Yeah, that's true. Man, see, that's the Kinnear that I like, and I felt horrible when they beat him up. I felt horrible when Nicholas pretty much says anything to him in that movie.
It's like,
But
you know what, Greg, this is my movie, so why don't you tone it down a little bit?
yeah, let's back off here. And but in Loser, he plays the professor of Mina Suvari and Jason Biggs, I guess. But he's just such an asshole in that movie, and he's so good at it. I hate to think that Kinnear is like that in real life, because you know how they always say that the worst people on movies and TV are actually the nicest in real life. So I'm going to resign to the fact that Kinnear is actually a really good guy.
Can we get Greg Kinnear on the phone?
Secretary Kinnear, please. It's in the K's, not the
Not
Q's.
the C. Kinnear with a K.
Kinnear
in case
with a
there's any
K.
confusion. That confusion with a C.
But Loser, again, was a movie that just around that time period, great soundtrack. Everclear. Everclear is the just an epitome of 90s pop alternative band. Makes an appearance in the movie. They're not only featured throughout the entire film, their music, but they are in the movie themselves. It's a great scene. And there's a scene in this movie where she's like, we can have an entire day, a day date together and not having to spend a single dollar. And so they go around New York City and they're they're doing these things that are free, but it somehow comes to their benefit: food, entertainment, drinks. And it's just such a sweet moment in that movie. And it's just kind of like he's basically in competition with Kinnear because obviously he falls in love with her. And I really like Mina Suvari in this movie too, because she's kind of unfortunately a bit one-sided in American Pie, because that's the character that she's playing. She's playing the love interest for one of the main male characters.
And she gets sidelined in part 2,
Yes,
and pretty much
very
sidelined
much
in
so.
reunion too, you know what I mean?
Right. And so this is a really good position for her to be in because she's the female lead. So she gets pretty much half screen time. And Loser is just such a great movie. I love that Jason Biggs, there's a scene in there where he fights somebody. And it's actually a very believable little fisticuff scene where I'm like, damn, Jason Biggs just kicked this dude's ass. And I kind of believed it. I was like, this is really good.
That
And
must be why he got the voice of Leonardo in like the Ninja Turtle series. Like
yeah,
it must have been like
yeah,
someone must have seen the fight scene from Loser, like, oh, this
from
guy
Loose,
can voice a Ninja Turtle. Yeah, let's go with that.
right? It's like he could swing a katana the way he swung that 2000s era laptop. But it's
Damn you,
just
Del Inspiron.
yeah, right. We'll show you, Mac. But I think that Loser is a really good movie. Again, not gonna lie, number ones can't hardly wait. I can't even lie. That movie's just so
We can
good.
share our
But
number one. I know
okay, thank you.
because like I know that we had a kind of a pre-talk about that, and
Yeah.
when I mentioned my number one, I just felt like why don't we just share a number? Because I would actually put 1A as Loser as well, because this is one that a lot of people flew under the radar for a lot of people. This is
Mhm.
what, like the year 2000, and
Yes.
this is when people were starting to get away from those movies a little bit, because
Right.
just like we're experiencing with the Marvel fatigue, it happens with every genre. I mean, it
Yeah.
happened with the slasher movies in the 80s until Wes Craven revived it with Scream.
Mhm.
It happened with the rom-coms, as we saw from the She's All That to getting to Loser, and Loser was kind of at the tail end of this golden age, if you will, of
Mhm.
romantic comedies. But Loser is such a great character exploration. And have you rewatched it recently? I haven't rewatched it in a while, but do you find that as you get older, no matter how many times you've seen these movies from our teen years, it hits different each time as we
Yeah.
get older? Did you find that to be true for you too?
I do. I feel like I'm taking something new away from the movie, but it's almost as if I'm not necessarily reverting back to it, maturely or anything. I'm not, oh, hey, man, I'm back to 16-year-old Steven. But
Yeah.
I do get transported back to that time period. And I'm thinking about my, just who I was as that person back then. But I do have the benefit of seeing things nowadays as, 40-year-old, a father. And I've actually ruined some movies from my past in doing so. I'm like maybe overly nitpicking some of the things that I never did before. And it's becoming kind of a problem because I'll watch something now. I'm like, oh, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would he do that? And I guess that just comes with age and wisdom, as it would be. But yeah, I am running into that issue a little bit.
It takes you back. I think for me personally, it was like I kind of cringe at my younger self, which in a way I
Yeah.
tell people I think that's a good sign. If you're like, hey, like I was doing great at 16, like, hold on. Like, I think the whole point of growth is that I don't think we should cringe at ourselves, but understand that we're not that version of ourselves anymore. Like, it's like that's a previous version of the iPhone. Like, we're not on the iPhone 3 anymore.
No.
We progressed to the 15 Pro Max at this point, and then so on and so forth. And I think that's the thing that's been almost therapeutic to me. It's almost like I'm letting my younger self off the hook, because I
Right.
remember my insecurities and feeling I didn't belong watching these movies. Yet this was the ultimate wish fulfillment and escapism for me watching these films. And as I get older and I've done my fair share of therapy and understanding coping mechanisms and unwrapping trauma, for me it's like I gotta cut my younger self some slack, because like that's we don't know, and especially in our era, Stephen, we didn't have the luxury. We had the internet, but not the luxury of the information at our fingertips 24/7. We
Right.
really had to just wing it the best we could. And our parents were really doing the best they could, with what the circumstances they were given. And I think that's really the turn it's taking for me. Like, I'm able to enjoy it more, if that makes sense. But I do see more of the subtext and some of these mental health themes, whether they're intentional or not. I see like clearly the coping mechanisms, and clearly like this is a trauma response. But more than anything, I feel like I'm letting my younger self off the hook. I used to be so judgmental of my younger self.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I think a lot of us are in that boat as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's well said. And on that note, I'm not going to be able to match that as eloquently as you did, but I guess that summarizes all of our top fives. I'll be making a post about it and put a little pictogram chart of all of our picks together. And again, Jon Lee Brody, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me about teen rom-coms, because it's just nice to share that opinion. I think it's also nice that two men are doing it,
Yeah.
because I think that in an era of toxic masculinity, it's nice to be able to have a deep rooted conversation about movies that make you feel, and you can talk about love so openly and expressively. And that's always been something that I've been, good at. I've always been able to talk about movies on emotional levels, and it's always good to still be able to do that these days. And so in closing, I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for listening to the episode. If you like this episode, please follow us on all of our socials. It's the Screen Addicts Podcast. Go to Facebook, follow us on Screen Addicts Fanatics. It's a little group that we have, and that's where everybody's sharing posts, sharing trailers, sharing memes. It's just good discussions. Like people will talk about something that they've watched, and then we just talk about that movie. It's just a really good forum for that. And if you like the Screen Addicts Podcast, also check out my new show. It's called Real Problems, and that's REEL Problems. And what I do on that show is I take one film that had a litany of problems during the production of the movie. I've only done 6 right now, but they're actually doing pretty well. And I think that the response has been really good for that so far. So I thank everyone for listening to that. That's now streaming on all major platforms. And John, if you have anything that you would like to share before we close, please do so.
That real problems one sounds cool. We should let's sidebar and talk about that one.
Yeah, sure.
It's funny. I have it's on hiatus now, but I actually had a podcast called Real Psychology with the play on words REEL.
Perfect.
And it was me and my friend Dana Williams, who's a licensed psychotherapist and a wonderful actor as
Oh, wow.
well. But we would break down between my movie knowledge and her clinical expertise. We
Mhm.
would break down the mental health themes in movies and TV shows and
That's good.
really, shine a light on that. And it's a lot more evident in modern stuff because their mental health consultants are the norm at this point
Yes.
for TV shows and movies. But it's a fun exploration to do. So we should talk about that because I had an idea to expand the real universe, if you will, because
Oh,
there's
okay.
a lot of subcategories we can go into. And that was pretty scary. Is in full swing right now. Season 2 is underway. Freddie and I got a lot of fun plans. If you listen to season 1, we weren't shying away from the 80s B movies, which I never shy away from. I love my Chopping Malls. I love Night of the
Oh, yeah.
Creeps. I love stuff like Killer Workout. I don't know if you remember that one.
Oh, God.
But
That's a deep cut right there. That's a
oh yeah,
good one.
Killer Workout, The
Yeah.
Hunting, and Night of the Comet. Like I love those movies, and we need to shine a light on those films as well because to hold Choppy Mall to the same standard as The Exorcist is ridiculous. You shouldn't hold them to this. It's like
Right.
again, this goes back to the Hallmark movies. If you're expecting
Yeah.
Macbeth to watch Hallmark, even if it's called Macbeth, it's not going to be Macbeth. It's going to be the Hallmark presents this version of it. And I think we just need to really flip people's perspectives. And there's not really a unilateral standard for what makes a good movie. For me, if it's good to you and it resonates with you and you had fun watching it, then that's a good movie to you. If people don't agree, they don't agree. But if they do, even better. Just like we have here, we get to have a really cool, friendly conversation with each other and find common ground. So that was pretty scary. It's on Wondery Plus and anywhere where you can get podcasts. And I'm sure I'll be back on this one soon. This was a lot of fun, Stephen. Thank you so much for getting me on.
Sure.
I know that, like I said at the top of the show, it took a little bit of scheduling,
Yeah.
but this is a blast, man. Thank you for having me. I can't wait to come back if you'll have me back.
Of course. I guess. We had enough similarities. Like, yeah, it was a good combo.
I should have worn my glasses. I knew it. See, you seem little.
No,
I wear
yeah.
glasses too sometimes, but today I didn't wear them. So.
Yeah, I have to just because I mean, I got the Clark Kents on right now, but
If we were in person, I would have pulled the Zach Seiler and pulled your glasses off. Like, Steven, your eyes are really beautiful.
your eyes are really beautiful. Did you think that was gonna work on me, John?
Yes, because she's
Yeah,
all that was
you're
on
right.
your list.
I know. I was staying Laney's line. I'm
I
sorry.
know, but I went off book. I'm sorry, I improv too much.
Another thing about your show too that was pretty scary. I really love that y'all are doing that, and I wanted to give a shout out to that because you guys, when you did Trick or Treat, I'm so glad that you did that episode.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite. I mean, it is my favorite Halloween movie that me and my wife we watch it every year, and I think it's just one of my favorite horror movies. Period. And I'm glad that you showcased that because not a lot of people really talk about that one. And of course, I'm a huge horror fan, so everything that you all have done have been great picks. But the one that I hadn't seen since about 2002 was Audition. And
Yeah.
I always remembered Audition. You can't forget a movie like that. I went and I rewatched it because I have Arrow, the streaming service, and man, Arrow's got some of the best horror movies out there right now. But rewatched it on Arrow, and that movie was so much better than I remembered it being. And I know Takashi Miyake he's just so good at cerebral horror and just getting ingrained into that, like cutting to the bone, literally. And in that
Yeah.
movie, rewatching it, I'm like, damn, this movie is amazing. And I'm so glad that y'all brought that back to my attention because I'm still stuck on like Blade of the Immortal and 13 Assassins Takashi, just because
Yeah.
I mean the guy isn't really he's known for so many different genres, but as far as samurai films, you don't really get too many these days. And Blade of the Immortal is just and 13 Assassins for that matter. They're just perfect samurai films. But to go back to the well, Takashi, with Audition and even Ichi the Killer, man, I'm actually starting to rewatch all the things that I can of his just because Audition was so much better than I remembered, and just going back down his filmography. So in doing so, I love that podcasts like yours, because not only does it shine a light on a particular film, but it allows you to revisit some of those that you may have forgotten, or just exposes you to new things. And I just absolutely love it. So thank
Thanks,
you for
man. I
the
really
rundown.
appreciate that. I really appreciate that, man. We'll have to figure out it's down the line. I'll have to talk to Freddie about this. Obviously, I don't want to make this a confirmation by any means,
Oh
but
no,
we'll have to figure out a Screen Addicts that was pretty scary crossover in some fashion because,
sure,
like I said, I really enjoyed this conversation. I love talking with other
yeah,
cinephiles, people who just have a true passion for it, and that's really, I'm not calling on any particular podcast. I'm really not, but I just noticed by and large that's missing, that passion, that love. They say the secret ingredient's love, and I think
right,
that's appropriate given the genre we're talking about today. But you look at anyone who's very successful in their field. I'm talking elite, the Jordans, the Kobe's, the LeBrons of
mm,
the world, or the Tom Hankses, the Steven Spielbergs, the Meryl Streeps.
mm,
They all have just a genuine love for what they do,
right,
and there people are wondering what's missing from movies. I think it's that, and
mm,
that's not the fault of the filmmakers necessarily. I think Studio Machine is just they're chasing the almighty dollar. They're
right.
looking at algorithms, the weapons of math destruction, if you will, and so I really appreciate podcasts like yours, and I appreciate people like yourself because you have a genuine love and evidence by your vast library behind you, which I'm very jealous of. And yay for physical media, first
Keep
of all.
physical
Like,
media
let's
going.
not let physical media die, please,
Oh yeah.
because I still buy steelbooks. I just bought the Catch Me If You Can steelbook, and I love it.
Oh,
I
nice.
don't regret that purchase at all because that's my favorite Leo performance, and that's saying a lot because he's incredible in everything.
Mhm.
But yeah, I've really enjoyed this, man, and like I said, I hope to come back and well, let's talk about your Real Problems podcast too, because
Yeah, sure.
these are the kind of conversations I want to have. As you get older, as you know, we're both in our 40s.
Yeah.
You start to realize why our parents had smaller circles. They didn't have an abundance of friends per se, because
Yeah,
you get to a point where you realize you just want to surround yourself with the best energy possible. You can't be in control of it, but you want to surround yourself with that. So, it's an open door to you, man. And anytime you want to talk films on or off the record, let's just know that I'm game.
absolutely. Again, thank you all for listening. I am Cinema Steven Sosa, and adios, amigos.